So yeah, go ahead and if you can, explain your 3 books that you've written.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, and first of all, thank you for having me on your show. Really love what you're doing. So the 3 books, they're all a little bit different, actually. This latest one, Breakthrough, Master Your Default Mode, and Thrive, it's a self-help book. It's nonfiction um, about helping you understand your brain and really grow. So it's about self-discovery. Um, the first book I wrote was actually about AI, and it was a novel. It was written 10 years ago about life in 2029. And I wrote it as if in the year 2029, somebody picked up the book and is like, it's not a fiction, it's nonfiction. I kind of projected forward. So we can talk about that. But this latest book, Breakthrough, is about the human brain, sort of NI, natural intelligence, about how the brain actually works, focusing on what's called the default mode network. Very important discovery that I can tell you about.
Yeah, if you can, go ahead and explain more about the default mode network, its significance, and why someone should be interested in this today.
Yeah. So the default mode network, what it actually is, it's your wandering mind, right? Anytime your mind wanders, happens probably hundreds of times a day, you're focused on something, driving, doing work, and suddenly your brain goes back into the past, some memory from yesterday or from childhood, or has you thinking about the future. Um, that's actually the default mode network. And what's happening is your brain is shifting back and forth between these 2 networks. One of them, the default mode network, which is your wandering mind. And then the other network is called central executive network. That's your observing mind that is present here and now without all that mental chatter. So we have a crazy brain. We human beings, we're very different from other animals. But this discovery actually helps explain a lot of things around mental health, things like anxiety, depression, addiction, emotional pain, trauma, ADHD. The default mode network has its hand in a lot of these conditions. And what I recognize is by understanding your brain, you can actually heal some of these conditions. And so that's what the book's all about.
That's pretty interesting. And so I'm thinking through it as I have a very limited understanding of the brain. I think I've taken a few biology courses, and I've had an MBA class recently that had a large impact on how I view the brain. Because what that class taught me was kind of what you're mentioning, where you have your reptile brain or your pre-evolution brain, and it's kind of allowing you to breathe. Your organs are working. You drive home. Things you don't really realize you're doing. Is that where you're kind of leaning towards?
Yeah. Yeah. If I can summarize neuroscience in just a few sentences. So basically, you've got the 3 compartments of the brain. You've got the brainstem. That's the old reptilian part of the brain that controls your heart rate, and all animals have it. It's the autonomic nervous system. And then that's the sort of the first compartment. Around that, you've got what's called the limbic system. That controls your emotions, your memories. Other mammals have that. It's not unique to humans. And then around that, you have the cortex. And that's what's really different in human beings. And we haven't really understood the cortex until now. We're starting to understand the cortex has at least 7 networks. And these networks actually perform functions for us. So you've got visual network, helps you see. Auditory network, helps you hear. And then you've got these 3 networks. One is default mode network. It's your wandering mind. Central executive, that's your observing mind. And then you have another network called the salience network. And that's what's shuttling you back and forth between these 2 throughout the day. So this is all brand new science, but I'm trying to explain it in a way, not very technical, but in a way to help people, basically.
Yeah, you did a great job of explaining that, and someone like me to understand. But I think more importantly is that you're able to communicate it in a way that's not overly complicated and we can understand it. So I really do appreciate that. And so why is it important for the everyday person to understand this, and what kind of impact is it having on them?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people out there struggling with stress, with emotional pain, with trauma, with addiction, with anxiety. And what I recognize, this default mode network, which is essentially what it actually is, it is your ego. Because when it wanders off, what it's doing is going back into the past and deciding which memories to keep. It's actually building the storyline of you. That's why it wanders off. So actually, it is the self. It's the storyline of the self. And unfortunately, when we're stuck in that wandering mind, it turns into the monkey mind, and it can give rise to a lot of these conditions. So basically, by understanding your default mode network, by really understanding it, not on an academic level, but on an experiential level, you can actually break free from it, because you aren't your thoughts. You aren't your monkey mind. Actually, who you actually are is that higher self, that higher part of the brain, that central executive. By understanding it, you can actually break free and actually break through these conditions to that much happier place. So that's why this is really a self-help book. It's about really understanding how your brain works, which can help you. And it helped me. And part of this was from personal experience.
Yeah, in that one class I was mentioning, I think it's really important that we do know ourselves, and that's part of what that class covered. Was if you're going to be a leader in an organization, you need to understand yourself, but understand that everyone's coming with their baggage, everyone's coming with their history that has molded them to be who they are, and the stressors that they're coming into work, not only their past, but what's happening to them in the day. And so all of these things impact your employees, impact you as a person, and how you interact. So I think it's really an important topic.
Exactly. If you look at the qualities of leaders, leaders have patience. They've got rational, sort of decision making. They have restraint. They have integrity. Those are all hallmarks of that central executive network. The more time you spend in that observing mind that's present, you're naturally going to get those qualities of being a leader, being more efficient, being more productive. As opposed to somebody who's stuck in that default mode network, that tends to be a very reactive, judgmental place where you're constantly reacting to things. You have a hard time being present, and it tends to be kind of far from integrity and stuck in things like addiction. So this default mode network can take us down this pretty miserable road. But by recognizing that there is this higher road that science is now validating, I think you can definitely become that leader you were meant to be.
Do you have any tips or tricks for someone who is struggling with either daydreaming, depression, and they can't get out of this mode, or how do they turn it off?
Yeah. So we're all very different. Some of us are spiritual. Some of us never were spiritual. Some of us are practical. So I put every possible tool in this book. So this book does have spiritual practices. It's got prayer in it. It has mindfulness practices. And for people who've never done that, it's got very practical exercises, breathing exercises, focus exercises, things you can spend 5 minutes doing that will quiet that default mode network. And what I recommend is try this out for yourself. Spend 10 minutes. Start off by just observing your brain, whatever is going on, good, bad, busy, distracted, just look at it. Do the 10 minutes of exercise, like a focus exercise, and then take a look at your brain again and see, has anything changed? Do you feel any different? And so this book will give you all those tools. There's even medications in here, and even things that are at the cutting edge that are still a little controversial. Plant medicines are in there as well. So it's all the possible tools are in there to help you figure out what works best for you.
Yeah. And so to that point, I want to ask you this question. How do we overcome this? Because when you start talking through feelings, emotions, some guys like me and a lot of the males that I've run into, that's when we shut down and we don't want to open up.
And hey, I was the same way. I mean, I was one of the guys just like that. So the thing is, you're not going to control your mind. It's not about controlling. It's not about restraining. It's not about handcuffs, right? What you're actually doing is building this other part of your brain the way you would build muscle for a marathon, or you got a goal to lift a certain amount of weight. You want to build that muscle. You got to practice. So in the same way, you're going to build this observing mind, this other part of your brain, and the way it starts. So in the book, there's a really systematic way of approaching this. It starts off with stress, front and center. We all have it, and how to prevent stress from happening. And so the remedy for that one, I call it mindful relaxation. When you actually spend 20 minutes relaxing, but you put the phone away, you're present as much as you can, mindfully relaxing, whether it's going on a walk, listening to music, whatever it is, but you spend the 20 minutes putting all the distractions away and doing it. And when you do that, you're building that observing mind. And so initially, you may only be present for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It's frustrating, but you keep at it. After a week, after 2 weeks, you can focus for a minute. Then it turns into 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And what you'll see is as you build your focus, as you build your presence, you'll start to see that other brain getting stronger. And once you get a taste of that, you want to keep going naturally. And that's what happened to me and to a lot of others out there. Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that, and the analogy that you use is so great because I'm into working out. I love working out. I've been doing it since I was about 12. So when you say it in that way, you wouldn't want someone to come into a gym and start squatting 500 pounds. You have to build up to it. But the challenge, in my opinion, because even in my MBA class, we started that class every day with 5 minutes of meditation.
Wow.
And for those 5 minutes, I'm just telling you full transparency. I sat there and said, this is the dumbest thing I can do. And I would come home angry. Like, I'm spending all this money to sit there for 5 minutes and meditate. At the end of the class, I still thought that. But when she gave the evidence of why it was important and what benefits you could receive from it, it was really intriguing to see now how we fit that in our, everyone's going to have this excuse of, I don't have time for it. Yeah. So how do we fit this in? Because, and you'll see this, you walk around the store, people, their headphones on, you go anywhere, technology is everywhere. So how do we put these distractions down and make time for this?
I was talking to somebody who said, look, I sit down, I try to meditate and there's all these thoughts coming. I can't do it. I can't do it. And what I told her is, you're actually doing it. You did it. You were able to be present and recognize that your brain was really distracted. And I said, it's kind of like looking at a lake after a storm. It's muddy. You can't even see through it. But what you do is you got to keep going. And what you'll notice is over time, slowly, very slowly, the mud starts to settle. The lake starts to become clear. You got to keep at it. And so, and she kept going at it. It takes a little bit of time. It took 6 months for me. So, and just like somebody who wants to be a weightlifter, starting off is really hard. You got the 10 pounds on the dumbbell and you're going at, and it's really hard. But guess what? As you practice, it gets easier, and then you get a taste of your muscle, and you just want to keep going. It's the same way with mindfulness. You just got to keep going a little more, and you'll see. Initially, it's hard, like everything. 5 seconds, and then you're distracted. 6 seconds, but you keep going. 10 seconds, 20, and then you get a feeling of that peace when your mind is off, when the chatter is off, and it's amazing. That it's just like building muscle. So my advice is keep at it. And you don't have to sit in an awkward position. You can meditate going on a walk and just listening to all the sounds around you. It's the same thing. You just want to be present, turn on that observing mind that can observe in the present. That's all it is.
Do you think technology is helpful or is it hurting? And I know there's apps. So you say you can go for a walk. I could see when I go for a walk, I have my headphones on, music. And when I go to the gym, headphones on, music. I'm driving, headphones. So in my point, when I say headphones, it's very challenging to turn off. I don't see a time when my brain has time to rest. And the analogy I like to give is I go to the gym, I work out, I stretch. That's kind of like recovery. I may go not work out for the weekend, which allows me recovery. But in this sense, I'm listening to music, I'm watching TV, I'm interactive. There's never a time where my brain is slowing down and resting. Is that really important? And is it hurting me?
Well, I was the same way. About 2 years ago. For the longest time, same way. I love EDM. I was always listening to EDM throughout the day on the commute. I had an hour commute, constantly listening to music at the gym. For me personally, I can't speak for you, but for me personally, I was having issues with sleep. I was having issues not sleeping really well. And so it took me 6 months to get to a place where I didn't have to always have that music on. I found myself a lot happier. I sleep a lot better. I'm a lot happier now. But when I listened to music, I had a lot of mental chatter on all the time. I was always stuck in the past and in the future. If you're listening to music and you're present and you're in that flow state, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're listening to music and your brain is just off in the past and future, and there's a lot of noise and it's a painful place, then I think, yeah, maybe think about trying some of this out. But it's up to you. And I don't know, only you know, right? Only you know. But if you set that intention of wanting to be happy and at peace and remind yourself of that and take that journey, I can't tell you what the journey will hold for you. But for me personally, it took me to a much happier place.
This is just going to be a random question. Have you ever used the Oculus before?
Alculus? No, what is that?
An Oculus? It's one of those goggles.
Yes.
The Oculus. Have you seen the app on there that they have for meditation? It's pretty interesting.
I've tried that, and it was a little too much sensory overload for me. But you know what's interesting is, so I wrote this book 10 years ago called Project Bodhi about life in 2029, and so there are some predictions in that book. But the main character, so that book is actually kind of like self-help disguised as fiction. So the main character, Austin, is actually a psychonaut. He's somebody, he works at Google, and he's always distracted. But you see him transform, actually. You see him clear his mind and awaken, actually. And that book is about Google Vision, which I predicted in 2029 was going to replace the smartphone. Well, Apple just came out with Apple Vision. So it's not going to be called Google Vision. I still think smart glasses are coming. And I think there are going to be apps in there to help us meditate and help extend. But it all depends on your mental state. So AI can be an amazing thing, or it can be a horrible thing, depending on your state of mind, right? Depending on you. And that's, I think, true of any technology. It's good or bad, depending on our mental state, right?
Yeah, the app I use inside the Oculus, it's like Facebook's virtual reality goggles. It was sensory overload, and it was really bright, which was challenging because I couldn't lower the brightness. But the cool thing that I thought from that was that it had this line that went with you, and it told you when to breathe. And so that kind of helped me control my mind because I was focused on my breathing. And then once I could figure that out, I can transition that out of the Oculus and get my breathing down. Another interesting thing that I found out was I like to listen to a lot of audiobooks. And so I was listening to 50 Cent's audiobook. And I did learn was meditation. He meditates. And one thing that he does is that he said on airplane trips, he says, I am. And so as he's in his meditation, he sits there, he's breathing, and he's just repeating to himself, I am. And as those voices come in, he's knocking them out with the I am or whatever it is. And so I thought that was pretty interesting.
Exactly. And so what 50 Cent is doing, what Buddha was doing, what Eckhart Tolle's doing is turning on that observing mind, that central executive. And so now even the science is telling us, and there's all kinds of studies showing it can improve physical health, depression, anxiety. You can actually, it works just as good as medications in helping anxiety, doing meditation. But it doesn't have to be this crazy 30 minutes where you're in an awkward position. It's really that observing mind, that whatever it takes for you to be present here in the now, for that mental chatter to shut off, whatever works for you, stick with that.
So let's go back to the topic of the Google glasses and what impact you see that happening, because I'm bullish on the Google or smart glasses. And I think they're going to be very interesting to see where they go in the future.
Definitely. Well, I had some predictions in there that actually the Apple Vision Pro had already solved. Have you tried the Apple Vision?
I have not.
Oh, okay. So it's very different than Oculus because it follows your eyes. It tracks your eyes. Your eyes are the mouse. And I thought that was going to be the game changer. That's number one. Number two, they got to get lighter weight, and the Apple Vision are too heavy. But to be able to look out and to have your eyes as the mouse, and it sort of follows you. But I think augmented reality, when we've got a light pair of glasses that we can put on and look out into the world, and that AI and those glasses can tell us about our world, tell us like, what is it I'm looking at over here? That's when we're going to take the next quantum leap forward. And so you mentioned what you said about meditation. I also agree with apps that actually get you to be present and to turn on that observing mind. That's going to take us to the next level also. But think about navigating, right? You're trying to get around town. The glasses, the arrows show up in your field of view, or it has you avoiding certain things or avoiding certain people. So I think that technology is still to be developed. Apple Vision is just a taste of what's to come. And of course, you can put those on and be at a concert and feel like you're there. That already has happened. But so the very end of the book, Project Bodhi, is when they reveal these new Google Vision glasses. And I spend a good chapter just giving you a sense of what this technology is going to do. It's going to take us to the next level.
I was hooked in with one of the podcasts I listened to. It was with Mark Zuckerberg, and he was talking through the scam that was what were those pictures that everyone was selling?
Oh,
it
yeah.
Was, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll come to me.
the
crypto, NFTs.
Yes. So that scam that went around and all these NFTs, he was talking through that. But the part that he did talk through, which I was really interested in, was if you put these glasses on, once they do get lightweight, I think that's the biggest challenge, the lightweight. And when you put these on, you could place your TV where you would want it on the wall. You watch whatever you want. You could sit with two different people watching two different things, but still be in the same room, in the same environment. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, and thought, if that happens, now you're removing the need for all of the hardware. And so it's going to be a whole different market that you get into. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And also, live chatting with somebody, Zooming with somebody. Actually, you can already do this with the Apple Vision Pro. But one of the predictions was the person would kind of show up 3D like a hologram in front of you as you were chatting. Yeah, actually, the Apple Vision Pro does that. When you're chatting with somebody else who has the Apple Vision, you can literally see them in front of you, which is kind of a trip.
I thought, so you're going into holograms, and that's going to be my next big push. So I think holograms, I know Elon Musk said that he thought it was going to be robots, or he's pushing for that. I think that is really strong. He's much smarter than I am, so I'm sure that's a very important market. But if you think what's the difference between a robot and a hologram, it's just, you have no physical body. You can put that in a McDonald's, and now you have a person interacting, which is really ran by AI. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla's already starting to deploy their robot on the factory, and just wait till the smart glasses come. So there was another prediction in the book, which is there was going to be public backlash against all of this as the jobs are taken up, and the prediction was like a company like Amazon was going to be broken up, and there would be this populist movement. So, I mean, I think that is coming too. So there is going to be some pushback. I mean, Elon's talking about self-driving robotaxis coming, and the CEO of Uber sounded a little scared of what's to come. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting time, a lot of change, but the technology is not even really here yet. And even the AI is not really here. It's just the early stages of it.
I spoke with a gentleman, and he explained, just imagine the technology right now is the most expensive and the dumbest it will ever be. And as we move forward, it's only going to get cheaper, faster, smarter, smaller. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm excited for the future to see where the world goes.
Yeah. One of the predictions I had also was we would have Google Health by 2029, which is Google's AI that can diagnose diseases months before a human doctor would recognize any symptoms. And so the start of the book, you've got the CEO of Google and a board member going toe to toe about, well, this is going to hurt physicians, are going to lose their jobs. And so they argue about it. And actually, the CEO shows them a survey of doctors showing that Google Health actually improves their health outcomes. So I think, there has been this debate over technology. Ultimately, if we use it in the right way, it's going to help us. It's going to help us be healthier and happier. And but it's there'll be a fight along the way for sure.
So let's go down that road and see what your thoughts are, and then maybe we can have a debate on this, because it sounds. What are you optimistic, or are you leaning the other way towards the job replacement and the sentiment towards AI moving in the future?
So I'm overall optimistic, but I do think, there's going to have to be regulation. Government's going to have to have some limits on it. It'll be bumpy. There might be some technologies that really do put people out of job. I mean, ChatGPT, I think, has affected things like, writers, editors, copy editors, and illustrators, right? I think it has impacted them. The Hollywood writers who were on strike, there's now AI writing stories. So that's already happening. But I think you'll start to see industries push back, governments push back. It'll be like a push and pull. But I think ultimately it'll definitely take us to a happier place. I saw the same thing with in biology, the Human Genome Project. So our DNA genome, we can sequence it. In the 90s, it took 10 years and I don't know how many billions of dollars to sequence one genome. And now we can do it in minutes for like a few $100. And you can get your genome sequenced. So, and that's all good because now I got my genome sequenced 23andMe and I took a look at some things I might be susceptible to. And it helped me actually. I think having that knowledge is overall a good thing.
Yeah, there's also some benefits. So the benefits you're talking through with the healthcare, I think it's very interesting. It's going to be very challenging in the future. And this is my prediction. I think there's going to be a lot of jobs lost. And I think they're going to go through this wave. This is just my quick prediction. I think automation is going to destroy a lot of jobs. In my prediction, I'm doing some analysis. I'm starting a DBA into this, but I think 4 people are going to be reduced to 1 person doing that job, controlling the AI and kind of managing, narrowing that AI to get better results. And so that's across many industries, I think. And so what's going to end up happening is that the government is going to be forced to put some type of taxation on the corporations for using AI. And then that should be put back into the community to do some type of universal basic income. I'm not an advocate for that. I don't think it's a very good idea, but I think that's some of the ways that it could go.
Yeah. But also what new industries are going to pop up that we can't imagine right now, right? I mean, for example, that genome sequencing, now you've got all these companies at 23andMe and all these other companies that can sequence your genome. So what kind of new industries are going to pop up that we can't even imagine and where the new jobs are going to go? Obviously, the guy driving the Uber might have a hard time getting that job, but at least the young person coming out of college may have an idea to form the next book, whatever that looks like. So that's going to be the exciting part of it, I guess.
And I think the biggest challenge with that is going to come into place is that we as people have to see this and know it's happening so that we can prepare for that. Because, right now, just in my own life, I work, I do this podcast, I am working on my MBA and I'm starting a DBA. So, and then now you also want me to learn AI so that I can be better prepared for the future. So some people are just overtaxed. And so knowing this and preparing for it, it's really important to plan this out and really drive that through, or you will be wiped out by someone who is more efficient using AI.
That's true. That's a really good point. So yeah, I mean, there are companies out there that limit the use of AI. And if you're using AI, you got to clearly document that. And who knows where that's going to lead. That exactly right. That could lead to some regulation, taxes. So, but by talking about it, I think the best thing is to talk about it and prepare.
And I think that we have to push towards this, right? And the reason I say that us as a country, when I say we as a country, we have to push towards this because you as a country are only as competitive as what you can produce. So if another country is pushing into AI and they're really driving automation, then you're going to get outworked by that country. So there's that dynamic. So it's very challenging. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
It's also, we're not the only country developing it, right? And China, for example, I think China's getting ahead in the field of electric vehicles. I mean, they now you can battery swap. They've got all kinds they've built AI into their cars now. Their cars are actually better than Tesla's. And then what's happening with AI there? So I think there is going to be some competition. And hopefully that's healthy competition, right? Hopefully it's not unproductive. But so there's that element too.
Yeah. And so let's go back to the DMN and talk through some of the tools that you currently use or you would recommend someone to use and leverage so they can, get out of depression? We've talked through meditation, but what are some of the tools and tips that you have for them?
Sure. So speaking from my personal experience, so about 2.5 years ago, yeah, I remember there was one day where I set this intention. I want to be in a happier place. And I didn't know how that journey was going to unfold. It took me about 6 months, but I figured out all of the tools that now that I understand it, that silence and heal that default mode network, that quiet the mental chatter. So what worked really well for me, things like breathing exercises. You spend 5 minutes, you do 4-7-8 breathing, box breathing. That actually reverses stress because when you're stressed, your breath is shallow, it's irregular. So by doing the breathing exercises, you're forcing your body to release what's called GABA. So things like breathing exercises, focus exercises. You spend 5 minutes focusing on the present, maybe listening for 5 things, looking for 5 things, sensing 5 things. And then, so a step deeper are mindfulness exercises. And it's more than just following your breath. And that's called concentration meditation, where you spend 20 minutes, let's say, following your breath or listening for sounds. And when you're distracted, you come back to the now. That's concentration meditation. What was a game changer for me is what's called insight meditation, where you're in the present, you're meditating, but you're waiting for 3 types of thoughts. So craving, like a desire for something, aversion, like a dislike of something, or a delusion, like a thought that's just rooted in ignorance. You're waiting for those 3 and you label them as they come. That changed my whole brain. And because what that did is actually built that observing mind. So I talk through this in the book, but it's called Vipassana, insight meditation. For me, that was huge. Some other types of tools, prayer. So we don't pray. Some of us think prayer is a waste of time. Actually, prayer is a form of mindfulness where you come to the present with full honesty and acceptance, you connect with a higher power. That's actually mindfulness. So for me, prayer actually gets me into the present moment, gives me that jolt of focus. I pray every day. And for me, I just kind of zoom myself out, imagine myself out in the galaxy, looking at everything, just give some gratitude for whatever is out there. That's it. That's my prayer. And obviously, if you're in the Christian faith or Buddhist faith, you can pray however you pray, but that's another tool. So, and then there are, medications out there, and it turns out things like plant medicines actually shut off the default mode. It's a little more controversial, but I talk through that and what the science is showing us and how that might look once that is approved and legal, how we may actually use those to help us quiet that monkey mind. And there's even more in the book. So I try to put them all in one place, basically, for the reader.
I appreciate all that insight. And, you did give some great tips. But one thing I do want to transition to and ask you and see if you can give some insights on is, as a parent, how can we transition that to our child?
Yeah. I have 3 young kids. I've got a 6-year-old, 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And so I have to take a step back. In that book, I describe 11 knots. Okay. I don't call them disorders or syndromes. I call them knots. And I mentioned it starts off with stress. But some of the other knots are things like addiction, things like negativity, which is a big one. So I think as a parent, the best thing you can do is to heal some of these knots. So if you're somebody suffering from negativity, reversing that. And how do you reverse negativity? Well, there's something called equanimity, which is being at ease with unease. This is what the Stoics talked about. And when you meditate, waiting for negative thoughts, recognizing them, letting them go, you can actually overcome negativity. I think the best way of being a parent is to heal your own knots. That's like number one. Recover from your own emotional pain so you don't give it to your kids. I had a lot of emotional pain growing up and I healed it, and I feel like I'm a better parent for it. So I think, and some of the other knots like addiction, that's a big one. Loneliness, anxiety, dissatisfaction, poor lifestyle, which is sort of sleep, diet, and exercise. I put that towards the end. But I think the best way to parent is to heal yourself. That's my advice. And then once you've done that, trying to parent from a place that's less reactive, sometimes it's really hard. and to use that observing mind, that rational mind. Sometimes you feel, you want to punish your kid because they did something bad. Making sure you do things rationally and not emotionally with that equanimity. So a lot of this is about you, and it will make you a better parent, a better leader once you sort of break through your mental knots.
I think that is one of the best advice I've ever heard. So I just want to say, the reason I say that is I'll give you some context, and I'm not trying to stroke your ego. It really is good advice, because what I've learned from being a parent is no matter what I say, my child does what I do. And so all of these things or baggage that I have in my past, if I haven't healed it, they're going to subconsciously see that, or they're going to see that in the way that you communicate, and they're going to mimic the way you communicate or the way you're reacting. So if you react emotionally, they're going to react emotionally. And now you're at this struggle point, and it's only going to continue to devolve. And so it's pretty interesting. So this is why I do say it really is the best advice that you can give someone. So from someone who has experienced it, I think it's really good advice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's speaking from my own experience as well. And things like emotional pain handed down to me. And it's like, I don't want to hand this pain down to my kids. So I want to heal this pain. So that there is a chapter, that's not number 2, emotional pain. A lot of our behaviors are rooted in some unresolved emotional pain that maybe we don't even recognize we have. So getting at the root of it, healing it, and that's not number 2. Once you unravel that one, it makes it a lot easier to break through the other knots. So that one is very important. That and stress.
And are you talking through knots like muscle knots? Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah, it's kind of like a muscle knot, right? You got a muscle knot, it's stuck, it's firm. And what do? You got to loosen that knot, give it a massage. And what you're doing is letting the body heal itself. That's all you're doing. And these knots, you got to give the right tools so your brain can heal itself. The brain will heal itself from anything. You just have to understand it, and you got to set that intention. But it's the same analogy. You got it.
That's so good. So moving into the next topic that I want to talk to and see if you can provide some insight on is how important is self-talk? I've learned this growing up. And so this is kind of like a 2-pronged question. How important is self-talk? And then how important is putting yourself in struggling or stressful situations so that you can build resiliency?
Yeah. Self-talk, there's a difference between mental chatter, which is sort of unconscious, you have no control of it, versus self-talk like an intention, setting an intention. You may have a goal like, I want to, lift this amount of weight. That's a great goal to have. But the intention of, I want to live a life that's at peace, let's say. So that self-talk, reminding yourself every day, this is my intention. May I be happy and at peace. Very important. I'd say most successful people do that. They set that intention daily of like who they want to be, how they want to be. Maybe you want to be a better communicator, whatever it is, reminding yourself every day. Very important. Going through difficult situations are who builds character, right? Many leaders have said that. And so the very last knot in the book is resistance to change. Look, life is hard. Challenges are going to show up when you least expect it. Building that resilience now so you're ready when that difficult time comes is very important. So how do you build resilience? Actually, exercise. Exercise builds your resilience. Spirituality. Maintaining your social connections. That's how you maintain resilience. And things like mindfulness. And so what you're doing is you're getting ready. When that difficult day comes, you're ready so that you can recover from it and you can learn and grow, because difficult times make you learn and grow and be the best person you can be, right?
And so do you think that sports or group activities is important to overcoming some of these challenges?
I think sports very important. So when you're somebody who is, let's say, in the zone, you got a basketball player, he's drilling every 3-pointer. Well, that person is in the zone, fully present, actually using that observing mind because the mental chatter is off. So when you're in sports, you're in the flow state. It's a form of mindfulness, actually. I see sports as a form of mindfulness when you're fully present doing it. If you're at the gym and you're stuck looking at your phone and you spend your whole time looking at your phone, you're not in the zone, right? But if you're in the gym and you're in that you practice mindfulness at the gym. When you do each rep, you feel your muscle, you feel the breath. You'll have a much better workout. I guarantee it. So,
There's also a thing called the mind muscle connection, and I'm sure you're really familiar with that. But you know, I do. I've been lifting weights since I was 12, and so you know, I have a really strong background in understanding the body and how to lift weights, how to improve that, and you know, you can reduce your amount of weights and focus on just, and when I say focus, I mean really doing your mind to your muscle and connecting with that muscle and focusing on it to use only that muscle, and you can target it with less weight and still get an effective workout. So it's really interesting to see that happen.
definitely. And when you're present in the moment, actually being aware of what's happening, you're doing meditation. That's actually meditation. You're actually building that observing mind. And so at the gym, what I do at the gym, when I'm lifting weights, I try to feel my lungs breathing, feel my muscle. When I'm on a treadmill, I actually, every 10 seconds, I say things like, thanks for this focus. I stay in the present and I try to keep my focus for as long as I can. A couple of years ago, that lasted about 10 seconds and then my mind wanders off for like 5 more minutes. But now I can focus for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I'm a much happier person.
I find my of course my weakness is cardio, like many people who like to lift weights. And you know, my mindful talk, as you're saying that, mine is the opposite. Mine is, oh my God, my heart is going to explode. And as I slow down, it's really interesting to see that when my mind changes, I can say, stop acting like that. You got this, you can do it. And then I can pick it back up and go again. So it's pretty interesting to see how your talk can motivate you to overcome some of the adversities.
You know what I recommend? Next time you get that thought, just observe the thought. When that thought is like, oh my God, my heart's going to explode, don't react to the thought. Just observe, just watch it. Just like you would watch TV, just watch it come and you'll notice it just kind of goes off on its own. Just observe that thought and see what happens, which is basically mindfulness. That's what you're doing. You're watching. You're the observer. You're just watching.
So as you were writing this book, what was your reasoning for putting lifestyle towards the end of the book?
Yeah, you know, so there's a lot of good diets out there, exercise regimens. You know, you can lose 10, 20 pounds of weight in a few weeks, but the weight comes back for most people. And why is that? It's because a lot of us overeat to deal with our emotional pain or to deal with the mental knots. And that's why the weight comes back. So what I found personally is when you resolve things like stress and emotional pain, addiction, it makes it a lot easier to lose weight, to keep the weight off, to work out and build muscle. So that's why I put it at the end. It's like almost effortless when you resolve some of these mental knots that are giving you that resistance. So that's why I put it at the very end. And that's what a lot of the, you know, fitness gurus and stuff won't tell you is your own mind sometimes gets in the way, and you got to address that first.
As you were talking, I thought through some topics, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, so there's multiple knots, and as you're building, we'll use the analogy, you know, I'm working out, I hit that first knot and I start massaging it out and it transitions out, it gets smooth, and now I move to the next knot. And as I'm massaging that one and go to the next one and we keep doing this, how do we prevent the first knot from coming back?
Yeah, that's a big one. So the journey is not a straight line, right? There's fits and starts. And so with stress is not number one. It's really about figuring out how to prevent stress from affecting you through, and there's something in the brain called GABA. When you learn to release GABA, it actually prevents stress from happening. And so that's where we talk about like breathing exercises, etc. But as you go on, it's natural for that stress to come back. When the stress comes back, use it as a sign. Use it as a sign, okay, I need to get back to doing the mindfulness or the breathing exercises or whatever it is. Use that as a sign. As long as you have that intention that I want to be happy and healthy, you set that intention every day, you'll recognize when you've gone off the path. And it's just about getting back on the path. So for me, that path was like a crazy zigzag line, and it took me 6 months. But the one thing I had every day is that intention, every single day. When times were hard, this is my intention. I got to reorient, get myself back on.
I think that's another thing many successful people do is they keep a journal and they keep a diary of what their goal is for today. And they have their mission of their life or their person and what they want to do, what they want to be. You have that start out and you review that daily so that you pick up where you left off yesterday and you're not kind of veering off of what you mentioned. So I think that's a pretty good tip and it's pretty interesting.
Definitely. And then you'll look back 3-4 months later and realize, wow, I have changed. You'll look back at what you wrote 3 months ago and you're like, I am in a better place. Sometimes you think you're still stuck. But once you look back, you realize I have, let's say, awoken. For me, it was a gradual process. It didn't happen one day where I was like, wow, the light bulb moment. It was gradual. And when I look back, it's like, I have changed. So very important.
I was doing some research and I found that 21 million people in the US right now are depressed. And this is increasing. So what is the impact of that? Like, why are people becoming more depressed? And is it social media? Because I know it's becoming a trend to have ADHD. It's becoming like a cool thing. And so what is the impact and why is there an upward trend?
Yeah. Depression is one of those knots. It's 20 million. That's the conservative number because there's a lot of people who are undiagnosed. They don't want to go to their doctor to talk about it. And there's some shame in it, or they don't like talking about mental health. The actual number is much higher. ADHD also rapidly rising. So the default mode network has its hand in both of these big time. People with depression, their mind will wander off back into the past, some old childhood memory, reliving some old trauma, and making them feel like, they have no worth, or making them feel guilty. That default mode network is the problem for a lot of these people. And so I think this book helps you with that. And again, part of this is coming to understand you are not your thoughts. You are not your wandering mind. That's not actually who you are. You can heal that and find peace. The same with ADHD. ADHD, the default mode network also has its hand there. But rather than going back into the past, what the default mode is doing there is it's like a strong pull that takes people out of the present, and they have a hard time staying focused. And so even when they're trying to focus, it's like there's this pull that's just pulling them out. That's the default mode network. Again, having its hand, this old monkey mind of ours. So step one starts with the intention. I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. Number one is intention. And number two is self-understanding. Really coming to learn how your brain works and recognizing that you are not your monkey mind. That's not who you actually are. You can actually heal that part of your brain and be in a happier place, more focused, and overcoming that depression. So I wrote this book for people suffering from those conditions, actually.
I really do appreciate this, and I appreciate you writing this book. So I do want to give you some time to talk about some of the projects you're working on right now and what you're working on in the future and where people can find you at.
Yeah, for sure. yourdefaultmode.com is my website. I'll put this podcast there, and you can start reading the book for free there. Actually, you can see some of the other books, and all my social media handles are on the bottom of that page. I do have a job also developing cancer medicine, so I am sticking to that. I've been doing this over 2 decades, actually. I feel very strongly about it, and I think there's a lot of promise coming. The next project, I would love to write a book about the salience network, that's the one that actually decides to shuttle us off into default mode, let's say, or to put us into central executive. That actually holds the key. We're still understanding that. There's still a lot I need to learn, but I'd love to write a book about that, maybe called Salience at some point. But yeah, I think, and I've got 3 young kids to raise, so there's a lot going on.
We'll link all of his contact in the description below for anyone. So please go out, reach out to him, get this book, and support him.